99.99% of people will not understand what I'm about to say. And the reason for that is because in order to truly understand, you need to have experienced this yourself. And luckily for most people, they never have and never will experience what I've experienced. Nonetheless, this is part of the journey I'm going through, which is why I find it's important to share this. So let's start at the beginning. Yesterday really, really, really sucked. You know how I've mentioned in the last few videos that I've had breathing issues ever since my last treatment approximately a week ago, and how in the last few days it seems to have gotten a little better. Well, that was not the case yesterday. In the morning it was okay, but throughout the day it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, to the point where it's pretty much been the worst that I've experienced ever since I was diagnosed. I used to have asthma when I was young, and this reminded me of that. And the difference between asthma and the breathing issues that I've had since I was diagnosed is that asthma is much more intense, but lasts much less time. Whereas what I've been experiencing on and off over the last 18 months is less intense, but lasts for longer periods of time. So as an example, this last bout of it, it's lasted about a week at this point. And yeah, there were a few days where it was a little better, but for almost every single hour of the day and the night for the last week, I've had breathing issues to some degree. And yesterday was the worst of that. It felt like when I was young and I was having an intense asthma attack, like the type of asthma attack that when you're in the middle of the night struggling to breathe, have been for multiple hours on end, you get to the point where you're like, death would be a relief right now. That level of breathing issues, that's what I'm talking about. So yesterday evening, that's what it was. It was getting worse and worse. I'm like, let's go to bed now. Hopefully I can fall asleep. And once you're sleeping, obviously you still have breathing issues, but you're not conscious, so you're not aware of it. So I was kind of hoping to do that. So I think it was around like 5:30 when I went to sleep last night. Well, to bed, let's be honest. And then, propped up all the pillows, got as comfortable as I could, got in that seated position, and just tried to rest and relax and eventually fall asleep. And as expected, it did not work. I was just struggling to breathe for hours and hours. And it just got to the point where I'm like, okay, I cannot keep doing this alone. Like, I need to share this. And as selfish as I feel when I do this, sometimes it's just like, it's so intense that I can't go through this alone. And even though I know sharing that is difficult for my wife, that it hurts her, it causes her pain and sadness, sometimes it's like I can't bear it. I need to share it because I can't go through this alone. And yesterday was one of those times. So, started texting her, explaining the situation, saying stuff that I knew would be hard for her to hear, such as, honestly, if there was a button I could push right now to end it all, basically die, I would. Like that level of rawness and honesty, just because it was like so intense, and I'm just like, I can't go through this alone. So we ended up talking for like, probably a couple hours. And I know it was difficult for her. I know it made her cry, and I feel kind of bad for that. But, the process of talking and everything did help. And it got to the point where something unexpected happened. Because let me kind of explain something to you. Most people are afraid of death. If you're afraid of death, you have never experienced torture so intense that you get to the point where death would be a sweet relief. So there's most of the population who are afraid of death because they've never experienced that level of discomfort where death would be actually something that you look forward to. I wish, like, I remember being in that group. It was awesome, obliviously awesome. Unfortunately, it's been a long time since I haven't been part of that group because, I've had a couple near death experiences. That changes you, how you view the world and everything. Because I had asthma when I was young and I had those few moments where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm not the type to commit suicide. I would never do it. But in this moment, the suffering is so intense that if death was knocking right there and be like, hey, come with me, I'd be like, fuck yeah, let's go right now. So it's like, I've experienced that in the past. And because of that, I haven't been in that first group that I just described for a very, very long time. Then there's that second group of people, which is exactly what I just explained. People who have gone through such suffering that they've gotten to that breaking point of, you know what? I would choose death over this right now. I don't care about anything anymore. Death would be the preferable option right now. Once you've experienced that, it is impossible for you to be afraid of death because you realize in that situation, death is not something to be feared. Death is just one other thing that the universe or God or whatever you believe in can use against you to torture you even more than it already has. Because when you're in that moment, as an example, yesterday, when I was in that moment, I was struggling to breathe. And I'm not talking about 50% lung capacity. I'm talking about 10% lung capacity where it feels like you're drowning, where every single breath is torture. In that moment where you're like, I want to die, but I can't. It's like, it's literally impossible to be afraid of death. Death is something that you wish for in that moment. And once you get to that point, it just literally becomes impossible for you to be afraid of death. Then there's surprisingly a step beyond that, which I'd never experienced to this degree. I've kind of experienced it a little in the past when I used to do my challenges, push myself physically to the extreme, and I was in very uncomfortable situations, yet because of my mindset, I was able to be happy in those moments. Those moments of extreme discomfort. So it's like I've kind of peeked at this before. I knew it was there. I knew it was available. I've read books about it, such as, David Goggins, who did insane things, pushed himself physically so much that he just went so far past his breaking point and still refused to give up. So it's like I've been aware for a long time that this is something that exists. But it's like when you're in the moment, when you're in the experience and it sucks and it's horrible and you wish you could die and you're not able to, it's simply not an option. You don't care about any of that shit. But at some point, if you're in that situation long enough and you're unable to get out of it, it just pushes you so far past your breaking point that you eventually completely disassociate from what you're experiencing and it stops affecting you. You just, it happens usually in a snap and you just stop giving a fuck about everything. Not in a bad way, in a very, very good way, in the sense of I am suffering. This is the most discomfort I've ever been in my entire life, but I don't care. Doctor's saying me to die? Fuck him. Universe is trying to torture me? Fuck it. I'm struggling to breathe. I feel like I'm drowning. Who gives a fuck? You just get to the point where it's so difficult what you're going through that you simply cannot deal with it. And you just kind of boom, disassociate. And from that comes tremendous power. It's a feeling that very, very few people have ever experienced and will ever experience because understandably so, most people try to avoid discomfort as much as possible. And honestly, I don't wish this on anyone, but there is a tremendous amount of value that comes from this experience. This disassociating experience of, I can't handle this, so let's just stop caring. And you just become indestructible. And no, you know what? It's not just being indestructible, it's beyond that. I remember multiple years ago, I read a book called Anti-Fragile. And the concept of that book was, when something is fragile, basically it gets damaged, like it gets hit or attacked or something like that, and it gets damaged and it gets weaker. Anti-fragile is the opposite of that. When something hits you, when something hurts you, instead of getting weaker, you get stronger. So of course, I'm not saying, oh, this is a state you should be in all the time, because in order to be in that state, you have to have endured tremendous suffering and continue to suffer consistently. So I'm not suggesting, this is the answer, everybody should strive to achieve this, but being able to unlock that and have that as a tool in your tool belt is extremely powerful, especially when you're in a situation as extreme as mine, where your life literally hangs in the balance. And you can, in those moments of hey, I've been struggling to breathe for a week. For hours and hours and hours, it has felt like torture. It has felt like I'm drowning. It's felt horrible. It's literally one of the worst experiences of my entire life. Yet in that moment, I'm able to get strength from that and just be I don't give a fuck about anyone or anything. Nothing can destroy me. Anything anyone or anything tries to do to me in this moment only makes me stronger. And that is an incredible feeling to experience, as well as an incredibly powerful tool to have at your disposal. So I know that, on a conscious, logical level, some people can be like, yeah, okay, I kind of understand what you mean. But unless you've experienced it yourself, you cannot truly understand this. And honestly, there's a very, 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 very tiny percentage of the population who have gone through extreme suffering to the point where they've reached that level and they can truly understand, which is why I started the video by saying 99.99% of people will not understand what I'm about to say. That is why I said that. Yet once again, it's important to share this. It's part of the journey. And I'm aware that a lot of people are going to be like, hey, you just had a mental break. You're insane. You're delusional. I don't give a fuck. Say whatever you want to say. I have this tool at my disposal. Fuck you. So anyway, that was my story for the day. Thank you for watching. As you can tell, as a result of, that mental break, whatever you want to call it, but just getting so far beyond that breaking point that you just stop caring, I feel so much better. And within hours, yeah, okay, the night sucked. I still had breathing issues all night. Woke up dozens of times throughout the night. It was still a very, very exhausting night. And physically, I still feel exhausted. But mentally, emotionally, I am stronger than I have ever been. And it just feels very, very good. That's why I'm able to talk with such force, such conviction, even though, physically, yeah, I feel like crap. But it's it just doesn't matter anymore. Doesn't matter how horrible I feel. Doesn't matter what anybody says, what anybody thinks. Even the doctors, sure, I'm still gonna try and listen to them, do whatever seems right. I'm still going to try to find ways to alleviate my issues, such as breathing and coughing and pain, etc. There's no point in suffering just for the point of suffering, but I know that when suffering is inevitable, I'm going to be okay because the more I suffer, the stronger that I become. All right. That has been my message for the day. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the future.